Sick of getting blisters? Stop slipping and just be comfortable with Pure Grip Socks Pro. Great fit, great comfort, lots of grip, and an even better price. Available now at puregripsocks.com.
Skechers is not a brand that you think of when it comes to high-end football boots. However, they as a brand are looking to change that. And if you're wondering why I have two blank cardboard boxes, well, that's because that's what these boots came in. And that's because these are the Harry Kane mystery boots that were originally shown a couple weeks ago and have now been officially unveiled as the new Skechers SKX-01. I have them here in both mid-cut form as well as the low-cut variation. And for a pair of football boots where the brand was supposed to be a secret, it's pretty clear that the Skechers S is within the mold of the sole plate here at the back of the heel. And if you remove the insoles, you can very clearly see which brand these are from. Regardless, the secret is out, and the question now becomes, can Skechers legitimately make a great pair of top-end football boots, especially considering the $220 retail price? Should you buy Skechers over the more well-known alternatives? And of course, we can't ignore the obvious similarities to the now discontinued Nike Phantom GT series, and also given that they've signed Harry Kane away from Nike, and we also now know that the people behind the SKX are ex-Nike employees, coming from a brand that is more or less known for copying other brands' designs. Is it safe to say that the SKX is a copy of the GT1 and GT2 concept? I definitely think that is fair to say. Whether or not it's a direct copy, that's something I want to talk about more in this video and ultimately determine whether or not Skechers have done the Nike Phantom GT better than Nike. Spoiler alert, I think they have. So if you're interested in learning more, we're going to go over all the details of the new SKX-01 in today's video, including how they fit and feel on feet, ultimately determining whether or not Skechers should be on your radar for your next pair of high-end football boots. So if you're interested in learning more, please stick around, and if you are interested in a pair for yourself, you'll be able to get them below their normal retail price by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes by checking out the first link down below. And as always, if you enjoy these brutally honest reviews, don't forget to drop a like on the video and make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you haven't already so you don't miss out on my reviews of all the latest football boots of 2023. So first things first, I actually want to start off by defending Skechers a little bit here. And again, I've made it very clear in past videos I've made about these particular football boots that I'm really not a big fan of, let's call it the business practices of Skechers in the past. They've done some blatant copying, not necessarily in the football boot category, but certainly when it comes to casual wear sneakers, let's just say they've been sued more than a couple times. And while I don't love the fact that they're kind of launching their top-end football boot journey with what is admittedly somewhat of a copy of the Nike Phantom GT, I have the GT2 Elite here as an example, I will say that this as a concept, going back to GT1, which was of course the first model, wasn't a particularly original football boot as it was. The sole plate and stud pattern, very Mercurial-esque, something that Nike has done many times before. And as far as adding texturing to the surface of an upper, we've seen that well before the original Phantom GT. So to suggest that Skechers is doing something that Nike had only done exclusively in the past, I don't know that that's exactly fair. With that said, the similarities are undeniable, where instead of a fly knit upper, the Skechers SKX-01 features a fit knit upper, which is a thin knitted textile base with a polyurethane top layer and an internal liner that is kind of like this smooth, almost rubbery synthetic material, pretty well identical to that of the Phantom GT 1 and 2. Super pliable, but not necessarily padded in any way at all. This is going to have a very raw, barefoot feel for the ball, and then on the surface, you're going to find a micro texturing that they're calling PSC technology, precise strike control, which exactly like the generative texture of the Phantom GT is just some raised little lines with a bit of a wavy pattern that also has a raised texture to it, providing grittiness on the surface of the upper that is supposed to result in better grip and therefore better control. Does that texturing actually result in better control? Not necessarily, and the additional grip that it provides, I would say, is minimal at best. It's pretty much the same criticism that I had of the Phantom GT, where I like the grittiness, it's very very noticeable against your finger, but on the ball itself, the extra grip is very minor. And if you compare it to Nike's current offerings in the Phantom series, whether it's the Luna or the GX, the grip knit texturing of those uppers provides far more grip on the ball. So if that's what you're after, you'd be better off with those. But if you like the more subtle grip on offer from the Phantom GT series, this is exactly that. And without beating around the bush, this upper pretty much feels exactly like what Nike was doing before the Phantom GT was discontinued. Where I think Skechers have actually improved on the Nike Phantom GT is in the overall shaping of the upper as well as the lacing system. The shape itself is a little bit more rounded all the way through. I think it's a nice balance of width as well as volume. I particularly like the slightly more rounded shape to the toe box, and the lacing system runs more directly down the middle rather than being slightly off-centered, where with the Phantom GT 1 and 2, because of the shape and the offset lacing system, it was very common to get some really ugly creasing and kind of bulges in the upper. It just never wrapped my foot quite the way that I wanted to, although that's something that definitely varied from person to person, depending on the specific shape of your feet. With that in mind, the central lacing system of the SKX1 I think works really well. It allows for a great secure fit. The boots as a whole are super comfortable, more so than I ever found with either version of the Phantom GT. And the one-piece upper construction, having this kind of elasticated knit material across the top of the foot, wraps your foot very nicely. As far as overall shaping and comfort is concerned, I think Skechers, especially given this is their first go, have absolutely nailed it. Moving to the rear, just like the Phantom GT, and as we're seeing with plenty of different football boots these days, the SKX1 will be offered as a mid as well as a low, with the only real difference being this extra material that you get around your ankle on the mid-cut variation, where it is just an elasticated knit, as we see with just about every other mid-cut football boot, and the construction in the heel is an internal plastic heel counter that cuts off at exactly the same point, regardless of whether you go for the mid or the low, where the low-cut variation may be a little bit higher on the sides than the average low-cut football boot, but again, it's just kind of loose material that's not going to be super noticeable, with a little bit of an extension piece at the back to help with putting the boots on. And then internally, the lining material is this really soft microfiber, the same amount of padding in both. And the one thing I will also applaud Skechers for in this situation is that there is no cost difference between the mid or the low, unlike Nike, which will charge you an extra $25 just to give you a little bit of material around your ankle. Then the insole, fully removable. I'll give you guys a quick look at that. It's actually really solid. It's supposed to be a special foam from Skechers. It's what they're calling Hyper Burst Pro, which does feel relatively solid. I would say this is above average as far as the quality of insoles go that you're going to find on most top-end football boots. I wouldn't say that it ends up being all that noticeable when actually playing in the boots, but I do like the type of foam that they've used here. In general, it just feels really high quality, where you can see it's just a standard mesh liner on the surface, which is truthfully nothing special. Not a major standout, but definitely above average as far as high-end football boots go. When it comes to weight, I thought it'd be fun to compare the SKX1 to the boot that it definitely draws some heavy inspiration from in the low-cut Phantom GT2 Elite, which technically would be the lightest variant of the GT2. So all in the same size 9.5 US. We'll start off with the Nike model, and you can see that they weigh in at 7.6 ounces, the equivalent of 216 grams. Then we have the low-cut SKX1, and you can see that they weigh in at 8.3 ounces, the equivalent of 235 grams. And finally, the mid-cut SKX1, which weighs in at 8.25 ounces, the equivalent of 234 grams, 1 gram less than the low-cut variant, something I don't think I've ever seen before. So the Nikes are lighter than the Skechers alternative by what I would argue is a noticeable amount of weight, these definitely not being exceptionally light, but falling into a very similar range to a lot of other top-end models in that sub 8 ounce category, where these just above 8 ounces are, I would say, above average in weight in terms of what you're typically going to find from football boots in the $200+ category. And that's not to say that I think the SKX1 is a heavy pair of football boots, but they're definitely not as light as other options you can get of a similar style. As for why the mid-cut version weighs 1 gram less than the low-cut version, which is typically the opposite of what we see, especially given that this does seem to have more material around your ankle, the only thing I can equate that to is perhaps a manufacturing inconsistency, which is a little bit concerning given that this pre-release blackout colorway was produced in very small quantities. Around 50 pairs is kind of what's out there right now, and the fact that these do weigh more, like I said, is just a little bit weird. As for the base, there are definitely some noticeable design similarities between the SKX1 and the Phantom GT, predominantly in that you kind of have an internal sole plate and then a stud plate on the surface with a bar running through the middle kind of connecting the heel and forefoot, and then some cutouts in the forefoot as well. Is it a one-to-one copy? Definitely not. And again, was this particularly original? Not so much. But what you do find on the SKX1 that I do like is the 4 studs along the outside rather than just 3. I think it distributes the pressure a little bit better, and in general, the stud shape that they've gone for is relatively small in shape, even though they're not necessarily true blades, where you do get plenty of bite when pushing off, but don't necessarily feel like you're stuck in the ground. You still have that little bit of freedom to twist and pivot, and as far as the sole plate is concerned, it's a little bit firmer than what you got on the Phantom GT series. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's stiff, but it's on the stiffer side as far as most sole plates go, but as a whole feels like a really solid base, and in general not out of place amongst other top-end models. As a whole, I really like what they've done here. It feels quite good. On feet, the Skechers SKX1 is undeniably just very, very comfortable, much more so than I ever found Phantom GT1 or GT2 to be. And as far as the difference between the mid and the low is concerned, there is virtually no difference in fit or comfort whatsoever. The construction in the heel is the same. It's just a matter of whether or not you want a collar or prefer the lows. Personally, I just prefer the overall look of the lows, so that's probably the one that I would opt for if I were choosing between the two. But as far as the fit knit upper is concerned, it's thin, it's super pliable. After just a little bit of wear, it becomes even more pliable, and in my opinion, just feels way better than the fly knit uppers Nike had on the Phantom GT series. I love the central lacing system. The overall shape is great for my foot type, and I think will work for a lot of people as well. For a first go at a pair of high-end football boots, they got most of the things that so many new brands get wrong totally right. These just feel really, really good. No major complaints from me. Nothing about the fit and feel of this football boot stands out as an issue. From a width perspective, they have plenty of width to them, to the point where I think these will be suitable for most foot types. If you have extremely wide feet, like most boots, proceed with caution, but in general, these have plenty of width to them. And as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and the length is perfect. So if you are looking to get a pair for yourself, I would strongly recommend going true to size in order to achieve the best possible fit. So in conclusion, despite definitely being at least a little bit skeptical, I can confidently say that Skechers have successfully created a pair of football boots that do not feel out of place in the $200+ category when it comes to fit, comfort, build quality, and most importantly, overall performance. These feel like a really good pair of football boots. And to be brutally honest, although regular viewers of this channel shouldn't be overly surprised by this statement, I was never a huge fan of Phantom GT1 or GT2, but given the choice between the Skechers SKX1 and the Phantom GT2 Elite, I actually prefer the fit, feel, and overall comfort of the Skechers variation over that of what Nike used to offer. For how similar so many elements of these two boots are, it almost feels like the SKX01 could honestly be considered a Phantom GT3, because it really does kind of fix all the issues that I had with the GT1 and 2. Which leads us into the main question that I really wanted to answer in this video, and that is, are Skechers football boots legitimately worth $200+? And I think if you're just after what is objectively a pair of football boots that is on par performance, comfort, and quality-wise with other top-end options from perhaps more reputable brands in the football boot industry, the answer to that question is yes. These are pretty well as good as anything. Do I think they're the best top-end football boots? Far from it. But if you were a big fan of the Phantom GT1 or 2 and were perhaps a little bit upset of the direction of the Phantom GT series with Luna and GX. The Skechers SKX01, like I said, very much feels like a continuation of what Nike were doing. In a lot of ways, I would actually argue that they're better. And if you can put behind your brand biases, I think there's a lot of people that would be very surprised by the SKX01 from Skechers.